Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be reviewing angles. Our content objective is students will be able to find the missing angle using the properties of angles. Our language objective is students will be able to explain how they calculated the degree of a missing angle. Why am I learning this? Well, it's important for real-world problems like architecture. So, angles. What is an angle? Well, by definition, an angle is two rays with a common endpoint. The rays are considered to be the sides of an angle. So if you think of it like this, okay, a ray essentially is it's pointing in one direction and it has one point, an endpoint. Okay, so in this case, notice it is composed of two rays. So, a vertex is also very important to understand. A vertex is the point in which both rays touch. In that case, is point A. The sides are basically the rays. So this is ray AB, and that one is ray AC. Now, angle names. There's different ways you can read the angle. You can read it as angle A, or you can read it as angle BAC. So from here, BAC, you can go backwards, call it CAB. And then, like I said earlier, you can just call it angle A. Use the vertex. Now, you are limited to using the vertex sometimes because the vertex could be shared with other angles, so you just have to be very careful about using it simply by using the vertex. And if it's numbered, then you would, of course, call it by the number. Okay, so naming adjacent angles. So adjacent means next to. So adjacent angles are angles that are basically right next to one another. So here we can name two adjacent angles. If we look at WXY, I would say the angle that's right next to it is here, YXZ. Now, could I have also said ZXY? Absolutely, they mean the same thing. Okay, so YXZ or ZXY, same thing. Complementary angles are angles whose sum is 90 degrees. So 90 degrees, if you don't remember, it's basically a right angle. Okay, so here I'm going to basically consider angle A and angle B to be complementary. Why? Because they do add up to be 90 degrees. So here, when you see this symbol M and an angle, it's read as the measure of angle blank, whatever. So in this case, the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B equals 90. Okay, so here angle X and angle Y, complementary angles don't have to be adjacent. So here, if they simply add up to be 90 degrees, they are considered complementary. So they don't have to be adjacent. They don't have to be next to each other. Okay, so here, since they do add up to 90, I would consider those angles complementary. Supplementary angles, so they're basically angles whose sum is 180. Okay, so there's a difference. Complementary is when they add up to 90. Supplementary is when they add up to 180. So some people may forget, how do I tell the difference between the two? You can kind of use, okay, complementary starts with a C and supplementary starts with an S. So one way that Miss Rudy has shared with her kids is for supplementary angles, since they add up to 180 degrees, you'll note that you can transform this S to look like 180 degrees. And the same thing for complementary, you can transform that 9 to look like a 90. So that's one way to remember it. So here, I would consider these two angles to be supplementary. Why? Because the sum of the two angles equal 180 degrees. So they would add, since they do add up to 180, they are considered supplementary. Now, it can also be referred to as a linear pair, but a linear pair is very specific. They have to be adjacent angles that add up to 180 degrees. So they can't not be, disconnected. They have to be together, adjacent. So here, I wouldn't consider this a linear pair. They're not adjacent to one another. So please note that this is not a linear pair. But please keep in mind, supplementary angles don't have to be adjacent. As long as they add up to 180, they're considered supplementary. So here, because the measure of angle B plus the measure of angle C does add up to 180, I would go ahead and call that supplementary. So vertical angles. Vertical angles are formed by intersecting lines. Okay, they're basically opposite angles, And something to know about these vertical angles is that they are congruent to one another. Congruent means equal in measure. So here, these angles are congruent. Let me just highlight them for you real quick. So here, this angle is congruent to this angle here, okay? But there's another one. You can also see the other version, okay? And notice we use tick marks. Tick marks are used to differentiate between the different angles. So here I would say this angle is congruent to this angle here, okay? So if I give it numbers, if this was 121 degrees, this would also be 121 degrees. Supplementary angles are also in this picture, okay? How do you see it? Well, see this straight line? They add up to 180, so this is supplementary. This entire line is supplementary. Also, this one is a straight line. These two angles add up to 180, so they're supplementary as well. And then this line is supplementary when you look from here to here. And then this last line here. So supplementary, it's if you keep your eye out for it, you might notice it more often because supplementary lines are basically created to form a straight line. But remember, they don't always have to be adjacent, so they don't always need to be next to one another. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so let me show you a quick demo on a vertical angle. You're going to see no matter how I draw these two intersecting lines, okay, no matter where they intersect, you're noticing these vertical angles are always congruent to one another. 43, 43, 137, 137. No matter how I move it, if you look very closely at the numbers, the vertical angles are always congruent to one another every time. Okay, and there's no two lines that won't do this. Any two lines that intersect will always create two vertical angles, a set of two pairs of vertical angles. So here, let's go ahead and practice naming those pairs of vertical angles. I'm going to go ahead and say A and C are vertical angles. They're across from each other, opposites. Okay. B and D are also vertical angles. Now adjacent to, again, adjacent means next to. So if I was asked to name a pair of adjacent angles, I have some options. I can say A and B are adjacent angles. I can also say B and C are adjacent angles. I can say C and D are adjacent angles. And last but not least, I can also say B and A are adjacent angles. So what are all these pairs of angles also called? Well, let's see. A and B. If I were to highlight these angles, A as well as B, I hope that you notice that both of these combined will create 180 degrees, which is supplementary. Let's take a look at the next one. How about B as well as C? Again, combined, they make a straight line. They are supplementary. So the answer is they are supplementary angles, or specifically linear pairs. Why can I call them linear pairs? Because they are adjacent to one another. They're right next to each other. So vertical angles, again, are opposite angles that are across from each other, and they are congruent to one another, okay? But supplementary angles are angles that add up to be 180 degrees. They can be adjacent, but they don't have to be adjacent. As long as they add up to 180 degrees, it's good. So now we're going to name the relationship. We're either going to say they're complementary, they're linear pair, vertical, or adjacent. So just take a look here. Between A and B, I notice that they're across from each other, so I'm going to say that this is definitely vertical angles. Okay, B. Well, here, I'm not going to say they're complementary because there's nothing here that tells me they equal 90 degrees. In fact, it doesn't look like it's a right angle. They're not a linear pair because these two angles don't add up to 180 degrees. They're not vertical, but guess what? They happen to be adjacent. Why? Because they are angles right next to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and call this adjacent. For C, what do we see? Well, are they complementary? I'm going to say yes. Why? Because if this is 90 degrees, this here also has to add up to 90 degrees because together it made a straight line. So between C and D, I'm going to definitely say that these two angles are complementary because the angles will add up to a total of 90 degrees. What about D? D is definitely not complementary because these two angles do not add up to 90. I could call them a linear pair because they do make up 180 and they are adjacent to one another. So I'm going to go ahead and call that a linear pair. They're not vertical angles, but they are as well adjacent, and that is a given. Part of being a linear pair is the angles have to be adjacent. So I would say they're a linear pair as well as adjacent. Now moving on. Now at this point, I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to have you pause the video and try E, F, G, and H on your own. Okay, so let's see how well we did. Hopefully for E, you recognize that these are adjacent. That's all they are. They're not complementary. They're not linear. They're not a linear pair because they're not 180 degrees, and they're definitely not vertical angles. For F, I hope you put that they are complementary as well as adjacent. Okay. For G, I'm going to go ahead and say that they are a linear pair. And by definition, they're automatically also adjacent. H is tricky. Some of you may not see this right away, but they are vertical angles. And that's it. Okay, so now moving on. It says find the missing angle. Hopefully you recognize this right here, and you know that means that this entire angle is 90 degrees. Well, this angle is composed of two different angles. It's composed of a 52-degree angle as well as the angle A. So I'm going to go ahead and set up an equation because I know since these are complementary angles that they're going to add up to 90 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up as 52 degrees plus A is going to equal 90. At this point, I'm just going to go ahead and solve. I'm going to do the inverse, which is to subtract 52 from both sides, which will leave me with A equals 38 degrees. So I'm going to say A is 38 degrees. That is my final answer. Okay, moving on. Here, again, it says find the missing angles. So hopefully you recognize that these two angles are definitely supplementary. They form a straight line. So I know that it's going to equal 180 degrees since they are supplementary. So I'm just going to go ahead real quick. I'm going to highlight this for you so you can see. You're going to see that angle D combined with angle 140 degrees make up this straight line. Okay, so let's go ahead and set it up as D plus the 140 degrees equals 180 degrees. So in order to solve for D, we're going to do the inverse operation, which is to subtract 140 from both sides, leaving me with D equals 40 degrees. So I'm going to say as my final answer, D equals 40 degrees. Okay, so at this point, I'd like you to pause the video and try number 3 by yourself. Okay, so let's see how well we did. Hopefully you recognize that these angles are complementary, which means they're going to add up to 90 degrees. So you're going to go ahead and add the 70-degree angle along with the A angle. Solve by doing the inverse operation, which is to subtract 73 from both sides, which will leave you with A equals 17 degrees. And that is going to be the final answer. So hopefully you got that one right. Okay, now at this point I want you to try number 4 as well. So go ahead and pause the video and see how well you do. Okay, so here at this point, I hope you recognize that these two angles are supplementary, which means they're going to add up to 180 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and take the angle D along with the angle 134 and solve. In order to solve, I must do the inverse operation, which is to subtract 134 from both sides. I'm going to get that the angle for D is, let's see, it's about 46 degrees. So that is my final answer. Angle D is 46 degrees. Okay, so now go ahead, pause the video again and try number 5. Okay, let's see how well we did. These angles are supplementary, so 122 plus C should equal 180 degrees. We're going to solve by subtracting 122 from both sides and going to be left with C equals 58 degrees. That is going to be the final answer. Okay. Once again, go ahead and pause the video and try number 6 by yourself. Okay, so for number 6, you should have set it up as 15 plus B equals 90. Why 90 degrees? Because this symbol here means it's 90, so we know that these are complementary. So we're going to go ahead and do the inverse operation by subtracting 15 from both sides, leaving us with B equals, let's see, it's about 75 degrees. So that is the final answer. It is helpful to also write it in so you can visually see, okay, so this angle is 75. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do 7. First of all, I'm going to recognize what kind of relationship this is. Well, if you haven't noticed already, I noticed that these angles are, hopefully you guessed it right, vertical angles. And the one thing that I know about vertical angles is the fact that vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so if this angle here is 65, the measurement of angle E has also going to be 65 degrees as well. Because once again, vertical angles are congruent. So please remember that. Okay, number 8. Go ahead and pause the video and try this one by yourself. Okay, hopefully it didn't take you very long. Hopefully you recognize right away that these two angles are vertical. So the measure of angle E is definitely 39 degrees. Okay, so for number 9, hopefully you can just tell right off the bat by looking, you can say that the measurement of angle F is going to be 114. Why? Because these angles are vertical angles. Okay, so what about number 10? Number 10 is asking just a little bit more. Okay, and they're just asking for 1. Right away, I'm going to go with, okay, these two angles are vertical angles, so by default, I know right away angle A needs to be 50 degrees for sure. Okay, well, the other thing I know is the fact that this right here, the measurement of angle A plus the measurement of angle, the measure of angle B plus the measure of angle A, they form this straight line, which means these two angles are supplementary, or aka a linear pair. So I'm going to set it up like so. I'm going to say the measurement of angle B plus measurement of angle A, which, we already know is 50, is 180. Let's figure out what the measurement of angle B is. Let's do the inverse operation. And we can see that B equals 130 degrees. So guess what? B and C are vertical angles, so there's not much more work that I need to do. I can go ahead and claim that C is also 130 degrees. But if you wanted to repeat the supplementary angles, you would have gotten the same answer regardless. So my final answer is A is 50 degrees, B is 130 degrees, and C is also 130 degrees as well. Okay, what about 11? Well, let's see. First, it's always important to see what the relationship is between these two angles. Looking at them, I can see that these two angles are vertical angles, which means these two angles are congruent to one another. So I'm going to go set it up as 37 should equal 3x plus 1. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and solve for x. First thing I'm going to get rid of is my constant. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, leaving me with 36 equals 3x. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by 3 to isolate x, leaving me with 12 equals x. It did say find the value of x and the missing angle. So right now I know the value of x is 12. That's part of it. They're also asking for the missing angle. So the missing angle is 3x plus 1. So I'm going to go ahead and simply plug in my value for x, which I got was 12. Then I will add 1. Now here we get 36 plus 1 equals 37. Now why does that answer look so familiar? Well, because remember, vertical angles are congruent. So was it really necessary for you to plug in this value to figure out that it was 37? No. Just simply knowing that these two angles are vertical angles tells you that they are congruent. So right away you could have told me that the missing angle is 37. So let's take a look at number 12. It says find the value of x and the missing angle. So first things first, we need to understand what type of relationship these two angles have. I would definitely call these two angles supplementary. Why? Because they add up to 180 degrees. If you look very closely, they do add up to form a very straight line. So definitely want to say that they're supplementary. So I know that they add up to 180, so I'm going to set it up as 4x plus 2x plus 12. So at this point, I can go ahead and combine like terms. So I'm going to gather 4x with positive 2x, leaving me with 6x plus 12 equals 180 degrees. Now at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and do the inverse operation, which is to subtract 12 from both sides, which is going to leave me with 6x equals 168. Now what I'm going to have to do is divide both sides by 6. You'll notice here that the 6's cancel each other out. I'm going to do some side work real quick. 168 divided by 6. This goes in once, not once, twice. With a remainder of 4, bring down this 8. This is going to go in 28 times. So now I'm left with x equals 28. So I'm going to definitely say the value of x is 28. However, we're not done. We're supposed to find those missing angles. So for the 4x, let's plug that in. We have 4 times 28 for that angle. Let's do some side work. 28 times 4 is going to be 32. That's 8 plus 3 is 11. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's 112 degrees. Now here we have 2x plus 12, so let's also do that. 2 instead of an x, let's put our 28 plus 12. What is that going to give us? Again, I'm going to do some side work, so I'm going to do 28 times 2, that's 16, carry the 1. We have 56 plus 12. What is that going to give us? Again, I'm going to have to do some side work. Let's add 12 onto that. It's 8, that's a 6. We have 68 degrees. Now, one thing to do that's going to be great for you is if you check to see if they actually add up to 180. So I'm going to check. Does 112 and 68 really add up to 180? The answer is yes. So I'm pretty confident that this missing angle is 112 and this angle is 68 degrees. Okay, so now I'm going to challenge you. I want you to pause the video and try number 13 by yourself. Okay, so hopefully you recognize that these two angles are supplementary. So you're going to go ahead and add them up. They should equal 180, so we're going to set it up as 4x plus 5 plus, I'm using different colors so you can kind of see, 3x. So the very first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and combine like terms. So this is going to be 7x plus 5 equals 180 degrees. Now we're going to go ahead and subtract 5 from both sides, which is going to leave us with 7x equals 175. Now do the inverse, which is divide both sides by 7. These cross cancel. So let's do some side work. 175 divided by 7. This is going to go in about 2 times. And then bring down this 5. 7 goes into 35 5 times. So x is 25. But we're not done. They're also asking for those missing angles. So for this missing angle, let's plug in 4, and then x is put 25 plus 5. Here I know 4 times 25 is 100, so plus 5 is 105. So that's the first missing angle. Now for the second one, it's 3x, so it's 3 times 25. That's easy. That's just 75. Now again, it would be a good idea for you to double check to see if it really does equal 180. So 105 plus 75. Do they add up to 180? Yes, they do. So I'm pretty confident that this missing angle is 105 and that missing angle is 75. And the value of x, of course, is 25. Moving on. Okay, so let me do one more example, then I'll have you try some by yourself. Okay, so here I recognize that this means 90 degrees, which means this also has to equal 90 degrees. Why? Because it forms this nice straight line, so these are supplementary from here to here. But strictly looking here, these are complementary. So I'm going to go ahead and say x plus 3 plus 32 is 90. Because again, these angles here combine, add up to 90 degrees. So here we can combine these together, leaving us with x plus 35 equals 90. We're going to do the inverse operation by subtracting 35 from both sides, leaving us with x equals 55. But are we done? Hopefully your answer is no, because we need to find those missing angles. This missing angle is x plus 3, so we're going to do 55 plus 3, which is 58. So we're going to write 58 here. So my answer is the missing angle is 58, and the value of x is 55. Okay, moving on. Now, the 180 degree rule, this is something you learned from 6th grade, okay? We know that all the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees, okay? So the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B plus the measure of angle C is 180 degrees. So solve for x. For in this case, I know all of them added up should equal 180 degrees. So let me quickly show you. I'm going to say 85 plus 60 plus x. I just chose these 3 angles. They should equal 180 degrees. Well, 85 plus 60, that's 135. Plus x equals 180 degrees. Do the inverse operation by subtracting 135 from both sides. That's going to leave you with x equals 45 degrees. So what's x? X is 45. Okay, so at this point I want you to pause the video and practice to see how well you do. Okay, so let's see how well we did. Hopefully, you understand that all the interior angles of a triangle add up to 180, so you set it up as x plus 100 plus 35 equals 180. You're going to combine like terms. You're going to get x plus 135 equals 180. Get rid of the 135 by subtracting it from both sides, leaving you with x equals 45. So the measure of angle x is 45 degrees. What about number 16? Hopefully you put y plus 18 plus 24 equals 180 degrees. Combine like terms, so 18 plus 24 gave us 42. We're going to do the inverse operation by subtracting 42 from both sides, leaving us with y equals 138 degrees. So the measure of angle y is 138 degrees. So now they're actually kicking it up a notch. So is this any different? No. Here, we're just going to go ahead and put 100 plus 35 plus x plus 5. So all that's different is instead of using a number, they have an expression now. But everything's exactly the same. So we can go ahead and combine like terms. I'm going to combine 100 and 35 as well as 5, leaving me with 140 plus x equals 180. We're going to do the inverse operation by subtracting 140 from both sides, leaving us with x equals 40 degrees. So we can say the measure of angle let's see, measure of angle x equals 40 degrees. Now I'm going to challenge you and have you pause the video and try number 18 by yourself. Okay, so let's see how well you did. Hopefully you put 18 here plus 24 plus y plus 8, y minus 8, my mistake. This is a triangle, and we know all the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So we're going to combine like terms. We're going to combine 8, 24, and negative 8. Be very careful. But real quick, 18 minus 8 is 10, so 10 plus 24 is 34. 34 plus y equals 180 degrees. We're going to do the inverse operation by subtracting 34 from both sides, leaving us with y equals, let's see, 146 degrees. And there is our answer. Wait, I should write it as the measure of angle y. It's 146 degrees. This one shouldn't have degrees because it's just a value. They're just asking for the value of y. Okay, so hopefully you got that one right. Guess what? That concludes the lesson for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, until next time, bye.